Hello, welcome back. Today we are going to start with our 18th poetry lecture, and it's going to be about the sonnet, the topic that we already started with last time. I think last time we tried to define the sonnet. We spoke about the first type, which is the Italian sonnet, and today we will start with the Spencerian, followed by an example on the Spencerian sonnet. Okay, so if you still remember, the sonnet has three varieties. Now we move to the second variety, which is the Spencerian sonnet. The Spencerian sonnet is a stanza is a poem of 14 lines, exactly like the Italian and the English. But unlike the Italian, the Spencerian sonnet consists of um, three quatrains and one couplet. Three quatrains means that we have 12 lines, and a couplet means that we have 2 lines, so 12 plus 2 equals 14 lines. The Spencerian variety is actually a type of stanza that was devised by the famous English writer Edmund Spenser. If you try to compare the Spencerian with the Shakespearean, that I will explain shortly, it will be noted that the quatrains in the Shakespearean sonnet are all unconnected with one another. They have each their own rhymes and cannot therefore be said to be related structurally, I mean, though they are united by their subject matter. Spencer had evolved a new variety of the sonnet in which each of the quatrains was linked to the other by intermixture of the rhymes in the following way. So you have A B, A B, B C, B C, C D, C D, E, E. So the second rhyme of the first quatrain introduced as the first rhyme of the second, and the second rhyme of the second quatrain as the first rhyme of the third. And the couplet, however, stands alone as in the Shakespearean type. In other respects, there is little difference between the Spencerian form and the Shakespearean. The following is an example of the Spencerian, and the reason why I started with the Spencerian before the Shakespearean is that I wanted to give you this example, which is which is Ye Dreadful Merchants, because it seems to me that Shakespeare was affected by this poem and he tried to turn it upside down. So it's a good idea to start with the model and then to move to the parody of the model. So I believe that Shakespeare parodied this sonnet in his sonnet 130, which is going to be our example on the English sonnet. The sonnet that we have by Edmund Spenser is actually number 15 in his sonnet sequence from a famous collection known as Amorte. And let us first start by reading the poem. Your poem is page 123 in your book. Okay. Ye dreadful merchant that with weary toil do seek most precious things to make your gain, and both the Indias of their treasure spoil, what needeth you to seek so far in vain? For lo, my love, doth in herself contain all this world's riches that may be far be found. If sapphires, lo, her eyes be sapphires plain. If rubies, lo, her lips be rubies sound. If pearls, her teeth be pearls both pure and round. If ivory, her forehead ivory ween. If gold, her locks are finest gold on ground. If silver, her fair hands are silver sheen. But that which fairest is, but few behold, her mind adorned with virtues many-fold. Okay, now let us start our discussion of this sonnet. Actually, we notice that in this sonnet, Edmund Spenser chooses a speaker who praises his lady's beauty extravagantly. For example, he is asking merchants why they look all over the world to buy precious, beautiful things, when all the world's riches may be found right here in the person of his beloved lady. 12 lines of this sonnet are a sort of, let me call it, conventional catalogue of the lady's beauty. But the couplet establishes the lady's mind to be that which fairest is, for it is adorned with virtues manifold. Unlike most English sonnets, dear students, the poem in Amorte, this poem, it's not addressed to an unobtainable mistress, but to Elizabeth Boyle, the woman Spenser hoped and eventually did marry. Yes, okay, he married her. While some of the sonnets were probably written before the two became involved, the couplet of Sonnet 15 indicates the speaker has a more comprehensive experience of the woman's mental qualities before her mental qualities beyond her superficial appearance. Like he didn't just say, my lady is very, very beautiful, but he added to that the mental qualities which are very unique according to him. Now, this kind of thing raises Amorte Sonnet 15 above the level of conventional sonnets, and the lady above the level of a simple love object. She is not simply an object, but she is a woman with a great mental faculty. Okay. What we also notice, um, he started his poem by asking merchants why they search the world for treasure when they will find it all in her. Spenser had taken over the scenario and the strategy, but he actually carried the result beyond the physical beauty of the woman that we are accustomed to in many love poems. Many love poems really focus on physical beauty. If you have read some of the sonnets that speak about coral red lips, rosy cheeks, golden hair, melodious voice, etc., you notice that Spenser did not really restrict himself to speaking about physical beauty. Now let us start with the first quatrain from Ye Tradeful Merchant till the end of Seek in Vain. The first quatrain sets the scene actually by asking why the dreadful merchants work so hard to obtain or to get rare and beautiful treasures from all around the world. So he says both the Indias, and this, for your knowledge, this encompasses the entire commercial world, since the East Indias refer to more than just one country. So this is the first quatrain. Now, if we start with line 5, the speaker claims that his beloved is more beautiful than anything to be found in the entire world. Of course, in considering this kind of hyperbole, I would say that it is not very unconventional. On the contrary, most sonnets focus on this kind of beauty. Um, we notice that the poet here is interested in showing the beauty, the physical one, plus saying that this is all crowned with the beauty of the mind. If we start with similes, we notice that it was rather an innovation in his use of similes. I have noticed that each valued item he mentions, whether we speak of sapphires or any other jewels, we notice that each item is presented in a clause, I mean grammatically speaking, that omits the verb phrase. For example, if you seek sapphires, Lu, her eyes be sapphires plain. These are not similes, in fact, they are comparisons. Her eyes are not as blue as sapphires, they are sapphires. Okay? He is using them as identical. These are not similes. Her eyes are sapphires by themselves. It's only when we reach line 10 does the poet substitute ween for be. This is the single place where he acknowledges the metaphoric character of his beloved treasures. But before that, he was saying that his beloved embodies this equality, but she doesn't look like this equality. Otherwise, the speaker's beloved doth in herself contain all the world's riches. Very literally, 6 precious materials are used here: sapphires, rubies, pearls, ivory, gold, and silver. All these compose this woman's head and hands, the only features that the poet describes. If you consider the couplet, you will notice that it indicates that what makes this woman special and most beautiful to the poet, her mind, remains private and exclusive. And let me say that this is signaled in the sonnet by the double use of but in two distinctive senses, like but what which fairest is, but few behold. The first but is a conjunction, and the second one is like what shall I call it? A modifying intensifier, synonymous with only. Only. Yani the second but is like only. So even though everyone can see the woman's eyes, hair, lips, hands, etc., only a few can know her well enough to be acquainted with her mind, which is adorned, as he says, with virtues manifold. And this was the last line of his sonnet. Another feature of this intimate detail is the way the poet expresses it. While the speaker details 6 features, not one virtue is named. He said virtues manifold, but he did not mention any one of them. The woman's face and hands are public. Anyone can see her and can observe her extraordinary beauty. But listen, only someone further honored by her acquaintance, however, can appreciate the quality of her mind. So we notice here that this sonnet is really very skillful and very clever in the way the poet spoke about the beauty of the lady. And this is Edmund Spenser's sonnet. Let us move to the Shakespearean, and then after that we will try and compare the two sonnets together. Now, let us start by talking about how is the Shakespearean sonnet different from the Spencerian, because you know the English sonnet came before the Spencerian. When we think of the English sonnet, it is interesting to say that the sonnet was introduced into England by Sir Thomas Wyatt and Henry Howard, known as Earl of Surrey. I think you still remember him. And these were two English politicians. They came from a diplomatic mission in Italy, and they wrote verses in the form of sonnets for the sake of pleasure. However, no one can deny that in their hands the form underwent a change, and Surrey, in specific, adopted a rhyme scheme widely different from that of the Italian model. Instead of the octave and the sestet, we have the three quatrains with a couplet. So the three quatrains in alternate rhyme, followed by a concluding couplet. And the famous rhyme scheme that I think you are acquainted with is A B A B C D C D E F E F G G. And this form was splendidly used by Shakespeare later, and that is now called after him, not after Surrey, the real originator. I don't know why, but probably because Shakespeare perfected the form, or probably he wrote more sonnets. I don't know, but it was not named after the originator. Okay. But notice that it is not divided into octave and sestet, and it doesn't have what we call a caesura or a volta. Now, let us take Shakespeare's sonnet, and if you still remember, I told you that the reason why I started with Edmund Spenser is that I feel that Shakespeare was influenced by it, but he didn't use the same style, but he rather turned the sonnet upside down. Okay, let us go to our book and find the sonnet. The sonnet is page 122. My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses damasked, red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. And in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet will I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground, and yet by heaven, I think my love as rare as any she belied with false compare. Okay, now let us see how Shakespeare deals with the theme of love in his sonnet. This sonnet compares the speaker's beloved to a number of other beauties, and never in the lover's favor. Her eyes are nothing like the sun. Her lips are less red than coral. Compared to white snow, her breasts are dun colored. and her hairs are like black wires growing on her head. Wow. This is our first quatrain. In the second quatrain, the speaker says he has seen roses separated by color. This is what we mean by the mast. Separated by color into red and white. But he sees no such roses in his mistress's cheeks. Why? I don't know. He says the breath that reeks from his mistress is less delightful than perfume. I believe that as a reader, and I'm sure many readers agree with me, this is the most shocking image I have ever read. It's an olfactory image related to smell, but it is really shocking that someone says that the breath of his mistress reeks. That is, it gives off an unpleasant smell. Yes, I think this is rather shocking. In the third quatrain, he admits that though he loves her voice, music hath a far more pleasing sound. And that though he has never seen a goddess, his mistress, of course, unlike goddesses, walks on the ground. In the couplet, and you have to know that Shakespeare was famous for the effectiveness of his couplets. In the couplet, the speaker declares that by heaven he thinks his love as rare as and valuable as any she belied with false compare. When he says I swear by heaven, he means by God, and this is metonymic, I think. Heaven is metonymic of God. So any love in which false comparisons were invoked to describe the loved ones. This is what he means by saying she belied with false compare, yani. That is any love with false comparisons. So what's up with the sonnet? Does Shakespeare want to satirize his beloved lady? What's going on? I think this is a very legitimate question. And probably the question that imposes itself here is, why is this sonnet considered one of Shakespeare's most famous sonnets? I feel that this sonnet plays a joke on the conventions of love poetry common to Shakespeare's day. And it is so well conceived that the joke remains funny up till now. I think Shakespeare wanted to turn the tradition upside down. He wanted to parody the love sonnets of his time. Because most of the sonnet sequence in Elizabethan England were modeled after that of Petrarch. And I told you about Petrarch, who used to love Laura and to write poems describing her enchanting beauty. So Petrarch's famous sonnet sequence was written as a series of love poems to an idealized and idealized mistress named Laura. So in his sonnets, he praises her beauty, her worth, her perfection, using an extraordinary variety of metaphors based largely on natural beauties. In Shakespeare's day, however, these metaphors had already become a cliché, but they were still the accepted technique of writing love poetry. Okay, it's love after all. The result was that poems tended to make highly idealizing comparisons between nature and the poet's beloved ladies that were, if taken literally, completely ridiculous. Okay. My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Okay, here we go. My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Her lips are red as coral. Her cheeks are like roses. Her breasts are white as snow. Her voice is like music. She is a goddess. This is exactly what was expected of Shakespeare to say. But what did Shakespeare do with these lines? Actually, this poem, exactly like many of Shakespeare's sonnets, are in many ways different from Petrarch because they tend to subvert and reverse the conventions of the Petrarchan love sequence. That is, the idealizing love poems written not to a perfect woman but to an admittedly imperfect woman. So, Sonnet 130 mocks, parodies, if you like, the typical Petrarchan metaphors by presenting a speaker who seems to take them at face value and somewhat decide to tell the truth. Your mistress's eyes are like the sun. That's strange. My mistress's eyes are not at all like the sun. Your mistress's breath smells like perfume? Well, my mistress's breath reeks compared to perfume. In the couplet, then, the speaker shows his full intention, which is to insist that love does not need these conceits in order to be real. And women do not need to look like flowers or the sun in order to be beautiful or in order to be loved, I believe. We notice also that the rhetorical structure of this sonnet, which is Sonnet 130, is, is important to its effect. If I go back to the first quatrain, I notice that the speaker spends one line on each comparison between his mistress and something else, like sun, coral, snow, and wires. The one positive thing in the whole poem, some part of his mistress is like. In the second and the third quatrains, he expands the descriptions to occupy two lines each, so that roses, cheeks, perfume, breath, music, voice, and goddess, mistress each receive a pair of unrhymed lines. This creates an effect of expanding and developing an argument, and neatly prevents the poem from becoming very traditional, let me say, or from becoming stagnant, etc. So, what is Shakespeare doing in this sonnet? Shakespeare is turning the tradition upside down. Shakespeare made the tradition stand on its head. Shakespeare doesn't want us to think in a traditional way. But if you still remember what we did in the first two sonnets, whether we speak of what's his name, Thomas Wyatt, or we speak of Spencer, we notice that they idealize their beloved ladies and they make them exceptional, and the focus is on the physical beauty of the woman and considering it as a requirement in love poetry. But as you have seen, Sonnet 130 is an unusual poem. It's an unusual poem. because it turns the idea of female beauty on its head and offers the reader an alternative view of what it is like to love a woman, despite her shortcomings. And that's why at the end, Shakespeare doesn't want to, if you look at the last line, he speaks about false compare. He doesn't want to compare his beloved lady to any other woman. So I want you to notice, and this is the reason why I taught Spencer before Shakespeare, is to show that this sonnet parodies other sonnets of the Elizabethan era, which were heavily into Petrarchan ideals, where the woman is continually praised and seen as beyond reproach. So, in this sense, this sonnet is a unique poem that turns the rules of and conventions of love poetry upside down. And I think it breaks a new ground. Now, was Shakespeare making fun of his lady? Wasn't Shakespeare aware of what was he saying, or how his sonnet sounded? I don't think so. For Shakespeare must have known what he was doing when he wrote this sonnet, because he ridicules an art form he himself was a master of. He couldn't help but mock other writers who were sticking to the Petrarchan model, like Spencer, Sir Philip Sidney, and other writers. So Sonnet 130 carries um, some similar themes to those traditional sonnets, like female beauty and other things, but it didn't use the same technique or the same language. So, different from other poets, I believe that in this sonnet, Shakespeare praises the imperfections of his lady. And by so doing, it could be argued that the speaker is very honest. You know why? Because true love isn't reliant on some elusive notions of perfect beauty. We are far away as human beings from perfection. The speaker accepts that his beloved is not a paragon of beauty, but a real woman with black hair like wires, off-white breasts, and a stinking breath. Is it awful? It sounds so, but if you think about it, who possesses a perfumed breath? I believe nobody does. So I think that here, if you read the poem, you will feel something different. You know what I felt? I felt that there is no poetic felicity on display. He is not trying to show off. You know that Shakespeare wrote around 154 sonnets in total, and 127 out of these 154 were addressed to the mysterious dark lady who is described in this poem. And she's described as a possible real life beloved of the poet. So our sonnet, which is 130, belongs to a subset of poems that delve into this relationship, expressing pain, delight, anguish, playfulness, and personally, I believe that this is lifelike. I think in this sonnet and many and the other 28 sonnets, the speaker was deeply in love with the woman, yet he was torn emotionally because um, she she was different. Okay. So Shakespeare here is being open, candid, and unconventional. And if you think deeply about it, you feel that the speaker has, and this is ironic, of course, has ironically given his mistress a heightened beauty. You know why? Because he does not rely on her outward appearance. So, this is what I had to say about Shakespeare's sonnet. So here we come to the end of our discussion of the sonnet. We've covered the three varieties of the sonnet. I think next time we will start with something different. Yeah, we are going to start with the elegy. So you need to prepare page 124. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. See you next time with the elegy and Ben Jonson's poem on my first son. Till we meet again, thank you very much and goodbye.